Thank you, Jitendra Prabhu. I'll get started. Let me just share my screen, everyone. Can everyone see okay?
Yes, it's
Okay,
clear.
thank you, Prabhu. So, firstly, I want to start off by thanking Gaur Kumar Prabhu, Jitendra Prabhu, and everyone on our Life of Devotion group, all the devotees, for giving me this opportunity to present today and try to share my learnings from this chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1. We'll be discussing chapter 17, which is punishment and reward of Kali. Um, since today is Guru Purnima, I wanted to start off by saying one prayer. Just give me one moment while I hide this video panel so I can. Yeah, okay. I'll start by reciting Guru Brahma. If you know it, please say it with me. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha. Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shantaakaram Bhujagashayanam Padmanabham Suresham Vishwadharam Gaganasadrusham Meghavarnam Shubhangam Lakshmikantam Kamalanayanam Yogibhirdhyanagamyam Vande Vishnu Bhavabhayaharam Sarvalokaiekanatham. Starting with today's chapter summary. So there are total 45 verses in this chapter. Verses 1 to 6 is the introduction setting the stage, where we see that Parikshit Maharaj witnesses a really ghastly scene. This is during his reign that it's happening, and it's a really upsetting view for everyone. Verses 7 to 15, we see the conversation between Parikshit Maharaj and how he consoles the cow and the bull, which we'll talk about more as we proceed in the presentation. Then verses 16 to 20, we see how Parikshit Maharaj's devotion and his qualities as a ruler were put to test. Verses 21 to 28 see how him being a great devotee as well as a very just and excellent ruler, what he replies to whoever was testing him. And then towards the end of the chapter, we see how eventually Kali also surrenders to Parikshit Maharaj. So, to give you a brief overview, this chapter mainly covers a scenario where Parikshit Maharaj is interacting with a white bull, a cow, and um, a form of Kali who is present at the scene. This chapter gives us a really good glimpse into Parikshit Maharaj's qualities as a devotee, as a ruler, as well as gives us really good takeaways of how we can survive and like continue to inculcate our spiritual values and follow the religious principles as we navigate through this Kali Yuga. So starting off verses 1 to 6, Parikshit Maharaj comes, he's riding on the banks of Saraswati River, progressing eastwards, and that's when he comes across this really ghastly scene where he sees that a person, it is being referred to as a Shudra in this case, not like caste Shudra, but someone who's not following Brahmanical culture. He's beating a cow and a bull very shamelessly and without any emotion. He's hitting them. And what we also see in this picture, if you notice, the person kneeling down is Kali. This is a slightly later part of the what's happening in the scenario, but you can see all the people participating. So the person who is bending down kneeling is Kali. Then we see the bull. So for the bull, we see that three of his legs have been chopped off and he's somehow still managing to stand on one leg, and the cow is kind of hiding behind him, scared, not really, like feeling very helpless, not happy at all. So you see that this is not a pleasant scene in any way. When Parikshit Maharaj comes across this, he notices that two of the most like respected and cared for animals in his kingdom are being like tortured in this way. He definitely gets very agitated by this, and he stops his chariot and he questions the Shudra, who at that point he doesn't know is Kali, as to why he's hitting and hurting innocent animals. So, what can we gain to understand from this scene? Initially, during the reign of Maharaj Parikshit, it was the system was the way, like ruling was done the way Krishna had set it during his lifetime, and like how he had established the principles while he was on earth physically present. So in God's kingdom, both cow, bull, and any animal was considered praja, or the citizen of the state. So they were given utmost protection. A scene like this definitely jars him, because this was not the norm in those times. Hurting animals, as we see like vehemently happening in our age and era, it was not at all common back then. Yes, of course, like tigers used to kill lower animals because that's how the food chain existed, but humans were not allowed to hurt other animals. We only subsist, like we were recommended to subsist on a plant based diet. So during the reign of Maharaj Parikshit, animals were given appropriate like protection and were treated with respect. Now, going forward, when verses 7 to 15, when Parikshit Maharaj notices this scene, he first starts questioning the bull. He's like, "Are you a demigod? How are you standing on only one leg? And why are you getting like beaten by a person who's dressed like a king, but is actually a very lowly person? How is this happening in my kingdom where animals are not to be treated in this way?" You can see that. So, like going over the slides, Parikshit Maharaj asks the bull if he's a demigod. Then we know that Parikshit Maharaj was an exceptional ruler and devotee, and he was extremely surprised as well as sad to see their condition. Krishna himself is Go Brahman Hitaya. He's very kind to Brahmanas and cows, and that's the surprise that causes Parikshit Maharaj to suddenly question everyone. So we see that he's really upset, and he starts questioning the bull and also Kali as to why he's doing this. What are the causes behind like hurting animals like this? Go and let's then we come to verses. Oh, actually, there's a little bit more here. So um, we see that in one of the signs of the age of Kali is that there is slaughterhouses everywhere. We know what is happening to cows and all of these domestic animals currently. But since that was not case back then, cows were given a lot of importance. They were given the most honors and everything while they were existing in this age and era. So when Parikshit Maharaj came across this scene, he was really upset to see all of this happening. Then moving on to 16 verses 16 to 20, we see that the bull, who is actually representing the principle, like he is the personality of religion here. It's not like an ordinary animal. When we notice that the bull is standing on only on one leg and is still able to hold his form, Parikshit Maharaj also realizes that there's something special about him. And simultaneously, on questioning, Parikshit Maharaj gains and understands that the bull is actually representing the personality of religion himself. So, and the cow is actually Mother Earth. In the presence of Kali, we see what kind of an influence Kali is having. And these are the very initial signs at the beginning of Kali Yuga, like how animals were going to be treated. It was the signs that he could see, which would progress and increase even more with the onset of the age of the Kali. So, in these verses, when Parikshit Maharaj questions the bull, he the bull first recognizes that since Parikshit Maharaj is taking an interest in the welfare of both the animals, and he's very angry with the Shudra for treating them like this, he realizes that Parikshit Maharaj must be from the Pandav dynasty, who themselves were related to Lord Shri Krishna, and they were always guided by his presence, who was the Krishna was their biggest confidant, and then they were always following his code of conduct and ruling accordingly. So the bull recognizes that Parikshit Maharaj is from the same lineage, and then he decides to test Parikshit Maharaj's knowledge. Now, when Maharaj questions him, like, why are they like getting through this? Like, who is mistreating them? Why is the person doing this to him? And who is that person? Then the bull cross questions him. He says it's hard to understand what is the cause of suffering. A lot of philosophers say that it's due to fruitive activity, it's due to a person's actions, it's sometimes due to material nature or one's own mind. So, how do we ascertain who or what is the cause of suffering? The bull then questions him and says, "You determine and tell me by using your own intelligence who and what are responsible for our suffering." Now, Parikshit Maharaj immediately recognizes that this question cannot be asked by like an ordinary bull. He recognizes the bull to be the personality of religion himself. And then Parikshit Maharaj answers him and says that with your talk, I can like immediately understand that you are not a regular animal. So that's the kind of conversation that's happening here. And but despite during all of this, Parikshit Maharaj again reassures them that, you know, this is happening to you, but now that I'm here, I'll make sure that you're taken care of. I'll make sure that I'll kill the wretched man who is torturing you, and I will make sure that you get the utmost protection. Now, we know that the Shudra who was hurting them was Kali himself. So, how is Parikshit Maharaj so confident that he will be able to defeat Kali? This does not come from a false ego or false pride. It actually comes from his confidence that the Lord will back him and will always allow him to fulfill his promise. He's since Parikshit Maharaj is a devotee, we know that to the Lord Sri Krishna, his devotees are very, very important to him. He will himself break his own vows, but he'll never let a devotee's promise go unfulfilled. If you remember, like when Bhishma Dev in his, like this was mentioned around Canto 9, when Bhishma Dev is in the battlefield and he's about to kill Arjuna, and this is a very like bad scene where Arjuna is completely covered in arrows and he's barely on his last few breaths, and that's when Krishna intervenes. Even though Krishna had sworn that he will never pick up weapons during the Mahabharat war, he takes up the chariot wheel and he goes and tries to rescue his devotee Arjuna, who breaks his vow, as well as fulfills the vow that Bhishma took the previous day, where he says that he will only like he'll make sure that Krishna enters the battlefield. And there's a lot to the story. You can definitely go ahead and check it out after the class, or most of you already probably know it. I just thought this was a very apt place to bring it up because Parikshit Maharaj is depending on the same confidence, the same devotion that powers him to say that I will protect you regardless of whatever happens. So this is where we can see that even, and there's another point to actually take away from here. So when the bull was questioned like who is hurting you, he did not immediately say, oh, Kali is the person who's hurting me, even though everyone clearly knew it was Kali. It's in him, he himself is a devotee. So we know that devotees never try to blame the situation. They understand that good and bad all happen due to the grace of God. So it's Krishna's will in the end, and that's how they take it, whether it be good circumstances, whether it be happiness, or even when you feel that life is not going your way or something bad is happening to you, it is all Krishna's will. So knowing that, the bull never blamed Kali. He understood that it's probably his own old actions that are causing this suffering right now, and the God is actually trying to protect him and trying to reduce the form of what punishment he could have instead gotten. This is another big takeaway from these verses. Moving on to the next. So in these verses 21 to 28, Parikshit Maharaj actually replies to the bull's question. So when the personality of religion asks him what is the cause, he immediately recognizes that he must be the actual personality of religion. We are aware that in Satyug, when everything was happening according to the way um, like the scriptural injunctions and the rules laid down by Krishna, we know that the four principles of religion, namely the four legs of the bull, austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, were all upheld. People were able to live a good life because all four of these principles were being upheld by everyone present. everyone who was a part of Satyug was almost like the most exceptional devotees or paramhamsas, and they were following this order, and because of that there was no suffering or there was no pain in the age of Satyug. But now, like, as Kali Yuga was progressing or like starting to dawn, Maharaj Parikshit recognized that since the bull represents religion, three of his legs, namely austerity, cleanliness, and mercy, have already been cut off. And truthfulness, which was still remaining, which was the last leg of the bull, it was barely holding everything up. Like the bull himself was also trembling, knowing that truthfulness was also not like lasting really well. It was on its last, you can say, last legs, or on the very few people who were actually truthful. That's what was holding him up still. Now, why did these principles of religion like get lost over time? So towards the start of Kali Yuga, irreligion took a lot, like became a lot more common. The four main principles of irreligion, namely pride, lust for women, intoxication, as well as falsity, all of them started taking root. This was due to the, you can say, the effect of Kali, or due to the way people's mindset changed. We saw that irreligion became way more predominant than following religious practices. While Krishna was physically present on the earth in his incarnation form, he was ensuring he made sure that he defeated all the kings who were not following scriptural injunctions, who were misbehaving. But the moment he left the earth, Kali started digging its roots in and started becoming, like, increasing his influence. So things like intoxication, ill manners, pursuing all the wrong things started increasing as well parallelly. Um, we can see even now, if we observe our surroundings, a lot of the rulers only are there for their own personal benefit. We do not notice truthful, honest rulers who are there to care for the people, to protect the citizens, and to think about their welfare. Everyone's working for their own welfare, looking out either for greedy for money or some other um, malpractice that they are like perpetuating everywhere. So this is kind of the beginning of Kali Yuga, where we start seeing all the signs. Seeing Maharaj Parikshit's reply, that his conclusion that the bull himself must be the principle of religion, immediately we can understand, like, he was a good, excellent devotee. He could recognize the good from the bad, and he could recognize who would be the one knowing religion so well. Now, another takeaway we can take from these specific verses is not just because of a religion, but we can also think of Maya as the power that deludes everyone into not believing the Lord's energy, or not believing in the Lord Himself, or thinking about all the wrong things and implementing all these malpractices. So, definitely the deluding energy of Maya is there, but with true devotional service, with um, chanting, with making sure that we are connected with devotees, we can slowly ensure that this Maya doesn't delude us and these roots of irreligion do not take seed in our lives. Okay. Now, before we proceed to the next next verses, I wanted to point out these four main principles of religion, which are the highlight of this set of this chapter in itself. Austerity, which is voluntarily accepting some amount of discomfort of body or mind, which is conducive for spiritual realization, not the extreme austerity where you're torturing yourself, but done in moderated amounts as given by scriptures, so that you can ensure that you are actually progressing on your spiritual journey. Cleanliness of body as well as of mind. So, like, cleanliness of body is easy. You make sure that you're showering, maintaining a good hygiene. But cleanliness of mind is the hard part here. Um, One may ask, like, how do we even monitor thoughts? They come and go like faster than the wind. How do we even make sure that we are practicing good cleanliness of mind? So that happens when you are surrendering completely to the Lord. Now, you may ask, how do we completely surrender to the Lord? That's such a big scope. How do you know that you've surrendered? So engaging your thoughts and constantly chanting, singing, and thinking about the Lord, associating with devotees, learning from them, listening to the kirtans, the speeches, the group lectures that are organized, making sure that you're not just listening passively, but also actively trying to process what is being said, reflecting on it. Reflecting is the key word here, because when you reflect on something, that's when you actually realize it and intercept it. Just listening kind of takes the context away slowly. But when you think over it, that's when those values get imbibed in you. So that's for cleanliness of mind. There are also supplemental practices that you can do, like moderating your thoughts, or thinking about, like, this is one of the phrases that I've heard and I really like swear by it, which is think what you want to think. Sometimes when even a wrong thought pops up, do you really want to pursue that train of thought, or do you want to actively engage your mind in something else? That choice helps you um, progress more on having a cleaner mind. Then the third quality is mercy. um, Now, mercy is not just about forgiving people or making sure that you're being kind to the poor, but it also extends by m- the biggest thing that you can do for everyone around us is to help them in their spiritual journey. So, the way, any way that you can expose them to Krishna's grace, through books, through kirtans, through like even just preaching, talking, or introducing them to our life of devotion group, bringing them in association of other devotees, all of those are the best work you can do to make sure that people are getting the right reasoning and the right way to progress in life. So, what can be a bigger mercy than bringing them to God's path? And the last virtue, which is truthfulness. This one is particularly very close to Krishna's heart. Being truthful is hard. It has a very big spectrum of what truthfulness means to everyone, but making sure that you are being truthful to yourself first and then the people around you, all of that adds up. It cleans up your character in a way that if you are being truthful to yourself, you will also be truthful to the people around you. So this is one, like all four of these religious principles are important, but truthfulness is of special importance because you can bring it in any day and start practicing it through like your everyday life as well. And it's very dear to Krishna. So moving on to the crux of the chapter, verses 29 to 45 is where Kali actually surrenders to Parikshit Maharaj. So when Parikshit Maharaj threatens Kali, Kali realizes that someone like Parikshit Maharaj, who is a devotee as well as a strong Kshatriya, is definitely beyond his abilities, and he cannot fight him off. He knows that while Parikshit Maharaj is ruling and he is around, there is no way Kali can exist anywhere in his kingdom. So at that point, Kali gives up his royal robes, his pretentious nature, and then he surrenders unto Parikshit Maharaj. Now, Parikshit Maharaj, being the great devotee he is, he accepts Kali's surrender. He's kind and compassionate, and he does not hold the grudge. He definitely knows that he cannot let Kali exist in his kingdom because irreligion will increase with his presence. So Parikshit Maharaj then asks him that you completely either leave my kingdom or leave this area, because I cannot allow you to stay here. Even if you are surrendering, I cannot accept you. Now, knowing that Parikshit Maharaj's reign wouldn't allow Kali to stay anywhere, he actually requests him that please then you provide me like a place where I can actually stay and exist without, like wherever I go, I know you will come and stop me. There is no place in your kingdom that I can be sheltered. So you give me shelter, you give me a place where I can exist. Now, this is one of the big takeaways here. So then Parikshit Maharaj allows Kali to stay in four primary places. He says that he can reside where there is gambling, there is drinking, there's prostitution, and animal slaughter are being performed. Now, if you think back, you realize like a ruler like Parikshit Maharaj will not allow any four of these activities to exist in his kingdom. So then Kali further requests him, like, you know that these activities will not be possible during your reign. So give me a more realistic place where I can live. So that's when Parikshit Maharaj says that you can also reside where there is gold. Now, why gold? Because gold is one of our, it is the way we actually, even in the current times, value currency and like the wealth in a country. So, why gold? Um, Now, if you notice, money is the root cause of a lot of religion, a lot of lust, envy, enmity, falsity. All of that comes from accumulating wealth, or it's against the people who have accumulated wealth. So you can see that wherever there is excess of gold that is not being utilized in the appropriate manner, that is not being used for serving devotees, serving people in need, that gold attracts Kali. And that's where Maharaj Parikshit allowed him to reside. One of the key takeaways from this chapter that you can think of is irreligion in the age of Kali is something that is people think is not avoidable at all, but that's not the case. If we are reinforcing and practicing the principles of austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, however small our contribution be, all of that will make sure that Kali does not take root in our surroundings, in our families, in our friend circle. By making sure that we are propagating these four values of principles of religion, we can ensure that Kali doesn't take root in our lives. These are not associated with any particular religion, or you don't even have to associate it with Hinduism or Krishna Bhakti or Krishna consciousness. These are very basic truths of living life, and these are given to us by Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. They are mentioned there, as well as you can also find these across the board in different religions. Even yogic science has yama and niyam, which is ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, which are the five yamas or rules of living life. And then niyamas are shaucha, santosha, tapaswadhyaya, ishwar pranidhana, which are again the five niyamas to live life by. To summarize, all of these five yamas and niyamas have the same principles of austerity, cleanliness, mercy, truthfulness, surrender to God, making sure that you are doing work for God and not for yourself. All of these principles are universal. So inculcating them in our daily life isn't easy, but it's also not difficult. That is one of our main key takeaways from this chapter. If we think about also like charity and not accumulating wealth, like what would you do if you're not accumulating wealth? So then you can either utilize that wealth for greater good, or it's recommended that 50% of your wealth you can give as charity. So these are some of the ways that you can make sure that you are not accumulating unnecessary wealth and hence not allowing Kali to take roots in your life. uh, Even accumulating wealth in itself brings in irreligion. So making sure that we are taking that into account when we think about our lives. And that is where we conclude this chapter. I will now go over some of the practical applications. I know I kind of talked about these while going through the slides, but I kind of wanted to still highlight these key takeaways. One of the best ways, like some of the best ways to bring in the four principles of religion into your daily life is by preaching Krishna consciousness, allowing people to come in contact with Krishna through books, through words, through even passively listening, hearing Krishna's name, chanting. All of those things are a step in the right direction, and we can encourage this path of devotion and bhakti, which will eventually also lead to following the principles of religion. Cleanliness of mind through monitoring thoughts or listening to the voice of our own conscience, listening to the guidance provided by our own spiritual, bona fide spiritual masters, of our elders and elderly in our families. All of that again helps reinforce this cleanliness of mind. Another key takeaway, which I kind of touched upon in midway through the class, was We know like how Earth and the personality of religion did not blame Kali despite knowing him to be the cause of mistreatment. They took it as Krishna's blessing, Krishna's grace. So thinking about that when you have any bad problems or even happiness in your life, just saying a quick prayer or quick thank you for God for giving you the good times, and during the bad times praying to God, asking him to give you the strength to face it. All of these little things account and amount to making sure that you're making spiritual progress. Um, Reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, reflecting on its principle, hearing about it from actual spiritual masters who can explain you what is being said, all of that can contribute towards your bringing the principles of religion into your life. Another few things are chanting Harinam, associating with devotees, and spending some of your accumulated wealth on charity. So these were some of the key takeaways that I could deduce from this chapter. I would say personal experience, I've talked about it a little bit even during the class. I wouldn't say I'm perfect in any way. I'm still learning, and there are so many things that are wrong with our lifestyle itself. But trying to make sure that I am not dwelling on unpleasant thoughts, making sure that even if an unpleasant thought takes root, I am redirecting my energy into something else. I am trying to always think about productive or good things, helps me keep my mind clean and not hold grudges as much as we go through life. It's hard to do, but sometimes it helps a little bit. And of course, saying a small prayer, chanting, associating with all of our amazing devotees on this group, even attending our Wednesday classes, they set me in a good mood for the rest of the week. When I miss Wednesday class, like I definitely feel that deficit in my life. And then when I'm back, meeting everyone, talking to everyone, listening to everyone, interacting with all of you, it helps bridge that gap and makes me feel more connected to what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's all. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's class. I'll stop the sharing now. And feel free to ask me any questions that you might have.
Jay, thank you so much, Mataji. This was amazing. I mean, it didn't feel like you were doing this for the first time, really. You were
Thank you.
so smooth in your delivery, and some of the points that I could gather, like you started by speaking about how Krishna, of course, you started by first breaking down the chapters into various parts, and then you spoke about how Krishna breaks his own promises in order to keep his devotees' promise and to protect his devotees. For instance, you mentioned the example of how Krishna picked up the wheel and charged towards Bhishma when Bhishma was about to kill Arjuna. So in this way, he not only protected Arjuna, but he also kept Bhishma's promise that that Bhishma had made a promise the previous day that he will make Krishna come like participate in the battle. So in this way, Krishna fulfilled his dual purpose. And then you also mentioned how if we don't want to be if we don't want to get drowned into Maya, if we don't want to get deluded by Maya, we should take shelter of devotees and spiritual practices like japa, etc. And then you spoke about the four principles: cleanliness, austerity, mercy, and truthfulness. And then how do we know whether we are becoming internally clean? Then you said it is based on how much we are chanting, hearing, and associating with devotees. And here you mentioned a very nice point which I would really love to apply in my own life, where you said it's not just passively hearing but also reflecting over what you heard. And only by reflecting properly, going deep into it, will we be able to imbibe those values in our lives, right? And then yeah, you covered so many important things, and one of the things I also liked was how you said the highest mercy that you can bestow on anyone is to give them Krishna consciousness, is to somehow connect them to the mercy of Krishna, to the association of devotees. And that way, if we can bring somebody closer to Krishna, that is like the highest mercy that we can give someone. And yeah, um yeah, these are some of the points that I have noted down, a bunch of others, but I let others speak and yeah, share their thoughts. But thank you so much. This was amazing. As I said, really didn't feel like the first time you spoke, and please keep it up. And we would like to hear more from you.
Thank you so much.
Definitely, this is not going to be the first time, Shreya Mataji. You're definitely going to be invited again. This is a wonderful class. I mean, the way you were speaking, the flow, everything was like perfect. There was no hesitation, nothing. You're so confident. So thank you so much for taking the time to prepare for this class. And wonderful, and the way you presented everything. So one point that really struck me is that Dharma did not blame Kali also. So Dharma, the bull, could have easily blamed Kali, right, for breaking 3 of his legs. But not once did he blame Kali, and he took everything as Krishna's grace. So that point really struck. So thank you so much for sharing that. And please continue attending and sharing your wisdom with all of us. And thank you again. Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you. Krishnan Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji, this was such a wonderful class. You know, the structure of the class was so, you had thought through the entire flow so nicely. And, your delivery was so good. I particularly, there were 2 or 3 parts of the class that really touched me. One of them was how Parikshit, you know, forgives Kali and lets him live. And so that was a very interesting point. And so I would like your thoughts on that as to why do you think that is? Why does Parikshit allow Kali to? This is what a common man would think about. As to, we all know that Kali is has to come. It's a cycle, and these things have to come. But why do you think Parikshit also let Kali live? And yeah, just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, so this is what Prabhupada mentioned in his purports, and it really struck a chord with me. Parikshit Maharaj was a ruler. Of course, he was concerned about what was the best for his citizens, but at the same time, he was also a devotee, and he knew that like a strong punishment after someone has surrendered already is not something that is correct according to our scriptural injunctions and how a fight or like even a battle happens. So that was one of the main reasons that he forgave Kali. And the way he put the conditions was also very smart. He asked him to reside where gambling, intoxication, animal slaughter, and ill treatment was happening. Now, in a kingdom that is ruled by Parikshit Maharaj himself, he ensured that there were no places where this was happening. At the same time, when Kali further asked that I should give me one more place where I can reside, which is more realistic, knowing that he couldn't find any of those in his kingdom, Parikshit Maharaj offered him a place where gold was being accumulated. Now, you would think that a kingdom would have a lot of gold, but then again, this is again Parikshit Maharaj's greatness, where he ensured that all of that gold was being utilized for his citizens. It was not sitting in his own stores. So, in a way, he actually put Kali in a very bad position where he couldn't really exist during his reign at all. Obviously, I'm sure he understood that with the turn of time, Kali would take his roots. But at the same time, he knew his prime duty was to protect his own citizens and at the same time also accept the surrendered person. So he tried to find that delicate balance, honoring his principles at the same time, making sure that he was being compassionate towards a surrendered soul, regardless of who that person is, even if it's an enemy.
Thank you so much, Mataji. That was such a nice answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Vrinda Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for such an amazing lecture. It was really beautiful, and just like all the Prabhus said, it was very smooth and your transitions were amazing and very calming, especially like after like during evenings, your voice was, and everything you said was really amazing. And I really liked how you mapped everything to our daily lives. You gave such practical examples, like why Parikshit Maharaj said gold, because that's how money is accumulated most of the time and how it represents money. And the two things I really liked about your lecture was when you said you have to be truthful to yourself, and how you explain like how we can implement the principles in our lives, and definitely the blaming part that the religious principles, they didn't blame Kali. So that was like really amazing. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Randa Mataji.
Lekha Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Shreya, a very eloquent lecture, and I think I had the same points that Brinda had in terms of like in term like the first point being truthfulness, and second thing being not blaming the Kali Yuga for our own mistakes, and that we might do. I had a question regarding truthfulness though. So can you share your thoughts on what does truthfulness exactly mean? Because sometimes I feel like when I see someone make a mistake, I'm like, okay, I mean, not that I'm a good judge or anything, but let's just say for this example, but I'm like, okay, how do they not even know this, like that this is a mistake on their part? But then when I make a mistake, obviously I don't catch that. Everyone is right in their own mind, and sometimes when somebody is making a mistake, they might be in an emotional, whenever somebody is doing something, even they might not know that it's a mistake because they are in their emotional vulnerability. So what exactly does truthfulness mean here? Because if I'm in my in my most emotional vulnerable state, i I think I'm just going to act based on emotions, or whatever it is. I just feel like what, like, no, I don't think anyone would do a mistake knowing that it's a mistake. So then what constitutes truthfulness? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I can give you my understanding of it, Mataji. I know it's like a very broad concept because truthfulness also means being true to what you're thinking. So I would say if you're in an emotionally vulnerable position, or you're about to maybe do something that is rash or not something you would usually do, I mean, I would say personally taking a step back at that point, making sure that something that's going to come out of your mouth, is it kind and is it necessary? Both of those, like I've heard it from someone, whenever you say truth, ask yourself these two questions: is it kind and is it necessary? So that's how I would think about it. Like if you're going to reprimand someone or lash out or react emotionally, it can also be out of sorrow. um, is this something that I really need to express right now, or will taking some time away from it or making sure that I just don't react right now and come back to it in a day or two, will the intensity be still the same? Like having that conscious thought that if you really believe that 2 days from now or maybe 2 months from now this small incident is going to matter to you as much,
Mm,
then at that point I think it's not wrong expressing what you're feeling. Obviously sometimes it's important to convey what we are going through to make sure that the people around us know what's going inside of us and they can better understand us. But then at the same time, if we know that this won't hold significance, maybe you can redirect it or say it in a slightly easier way, put forth your thoughts in an easier way.
mm,
How That's how I would put it back to like bringing back about truthfulness. If you're going to say something, then you are being true to yourself. I think there's less harm done rather than you pretending to be someone else, lying about it, and then building a web of lies sitting on one on top of the other. Um,
mm,
just making that whole big web, which could have just been one straight up, slightly harsh but truthful sentence,
mm,
that would just
mm,
end the matter. Um,
mm,
Gaurakumar
mm.
Prabhu, Jitendra Prabhu, if you have any thoughts, please add.
Go ahead, Prabhu. Jitendra Prabhu, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. It's a picky topic. Less is not. It's very. So again, you can't just. It's subjective also, because there are. I always say this, that I've told this maybe 100 times to Gaurakumar Prabhu till now. that morality is always hierarchical. It's not flat. So sometimes some moral takes precedence over some other moral. So similarly, yeah,
Yeah.
you have to see what is the ultimate good and accordingly, yeah. But yeah, truthfulness is like that. See, I mean, there is a story, I don't want to get into it, but there is a sadhu, kind of a sadhu, who has taken a vow of truthfulness. And then he actually one day what happens, these some thieves, they rob a place and then they run after killing this guy who owns that place. Now that guy passes by from this sadhu's place, and then this sadhu knows in which direction this guy went. And then this sadhu has taken a vow of truthfulness, and then these thieves follow this guy, and then they come to this sadhu's place and they don't know where that guy went, right? And then they ask this guy where he went. So then now it's what does he do? He has taken a vow of truthfulness, but if he keeps that vow of truthfulness, then he'll be harming that person unnecessarily, right? So then I think the story goes that he actually kept his vow of truthfulness, but then when he went to Yamaraj actually chastised him. He said, you did the wrong thing. He got the karma of, causing suffering to that person. So lying in that case was better for him, right? So truthfulness is very subjective, but again, this doesn't give us a license to just, become skinned and just keep lying. Yeah. It's like that. That is also not. We have to see, and then ultimately it comes down to whether we are being truthful to ourselves, which Mataji mentioned, which I really liked. Because if we're trying to be truthful to ourselves, then we'll try to see what is the best thing we can do, what is the good thing that this situation can take us to, and that's how we can kind of mold truthfulness according to the situation in a proper way, not like taking wrong advantage of the fact that truthfulness is subjective, like that.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, Gaurakumar Prabhu, you want to share something?
No, Prabhu, you covered everything actually.
Actually, you covered everything so nicely. I like both your answers. I like Mataji's answer and your answer. Actually, Mataji's answer was, I reminded me of Anudvegam Karam Vakyam, which is, if it is not kind, maybe you can delay it later. So I think that was nice. I wanted to share something that I heard just today. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, in one of his classes, he mentioned that Duryodhana thought that he was honest, and because he thought he was honest, he didn't think, or whatever he was doing was right, and so he didn't think that Krishna was God. And so that also, somehow, I was reminded of that when I heard one of your questions or one of your answers, that sometimes it is very our mind can play tricks, and we may justify whatever we think to be the truth, but even our mind could be deluded in some way, where it may not be the absolute truth.
Right. Yeah, Prabhu, I was asking this question based on the same lecture, Prabhu. I think from the same point that you just mentioned, Krishna. I think the lecture name is "Why Wisdom Sometimes Enlightens and Sometimes Doesn't" by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. So
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, that it's the same point, because according to Duryodhana, he was right, like he was no way wrong, and then he ended up thinking that Krishna was wrong, because in his mind he couldn't even see, or there was like no possibility of him even assuming that he could have been slightly wrong, um which was something that came up when Shreya was talking about truthfulness. But yeah, thank you thanks to all of you guys for this answer. I think it's a very reflective answer, and yeah, and it's so easy to kind of forget it, I think, but something that needs a lot of reflection and practice. And yeah, thank you.
Lekha Mataji, one more thing that I just thought of when you mentioned Duryodhan's example. Um, he thought he was right, but was he actually following what was given in our scriptures? Again, that is where it goes back to, like, was he following Krishna's teachings? Was he doing what was right? See, your right can be subjective, but what's the teaching of our religion? That's not subjective, right? So if you can, what he
Right.
did was clearly out of line from all of those aspects. So even if he would
Yeah.
have, I mean, I know the situations were not like were destined to be that way, but if he would have reflected on whether or not what he was doing, just without justifying it to himself, if it was really right from the true religious perspective, from even a humanity grounds perspective, I think he would have
Yeah.
probably realized some of his
Yeah.
misdeeds.
Yeah.
The thing
Yeah.
is, people like Duryodhan is they will even object to the fact that there does exist some objective truth like that, some objective.
Mm.
So
Mm.
it's again, yeah, it ultimately comes down to faith, whether you want to put faith in some ultimate objective reality.
Right.
Right.
Otherwise,
Right.
we'll just keep quarreling about the relative truths that we experience. I might say something is right, somebody might come and say something is right, and then we keep fighting. And yeah, sorry, go ahead, Lekha Mataji, you were saying something.
Oh, no, no, no. I wasn't saying. I was just listening to you guys. I wasn't saying.
I think a couple more devotees want to speak. Nitya first, and then Samaksh.
Hare Krishna, Shreya. Um, Definitely, like others said, it was a very smooth and very flowy, lecture. And I could not have guessed that this is your first, public speaking lecture. So thank you so much for so much preparation that went behind it. I could see that from the slide that you've condensed those 45 verses into, something that's takeaway for us. And like others have mentioned, I liked how you related everything to daily lives, practical lives, and especially of the four principles of religion. You had a slide just for that. It was really visually very for me, I'm a very visual person, so I remember those photographic things. So I remember that slide of the four principles of religion, how you mentioned how each one of them to be actually translated to our daily lives, like preaching Krishna conscious through books, chanting, listening to voice of our consciousness and of our spiritual master, and not blaming uh, the like just similar to the cow and the bull, for not blaming Kali for their situation, but accepting everything as Krishna's grace. Everything was beautiful. I also really liked, which I'm also a believer of that, is one thing you said is about think what you think. Think about what you think. I think that's really a beautiful way to self-reflect on our own thinking process. It's very, very essential as devotees, especially to see what I am thinking about, like be a mirror of our own thoughts. That's very, very important to do as aspiring devotees. And because we may be going on in a path of judging others, or without even us knowing about it. But unless we self-reflect on our own thoughts, it's impossible to see that that's where we are heading towards. We may be thinking that we are doing justice to our guru parampara and everything, but unless we self-reflect on our own thinking process, it's not possible to find our own mistakes. So that was very beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for a wonderful lecture. Thank you. Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so much, Mataji. Thank you.
Samaksh.
Hare Krishna. It was an amazing lecture, Prabhuji, Mataji, sorry. And I just, like since my childhood, my parents asked me to not indulge in any intoxication and not to eat non-veg and, not indulge in gambling, and all the four regulatory principles we have in KC. But I always used to think, like, what is the basis of their opinion? Like, why do they ask me not to indulge in any of these? So before coming to New York, I was in this understanding that it is out of their experience, that like whatever 40-50 years of experience do they have, they must have realized that people around them have fallen because of these activities. So that's why they are asking me not to indulge in these things. So, but then when I was introduced to Krishna consciousness, I was everywhere there was a reference about the four regulatory principles, and at that point of time I was more curious, like, where are these regulatory principles coming, and is there any reference in Shastras or in Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam about the four regulative principles? And there is like clear shlokas of the four regulative principles, which I found. I don't recall the words, maybe Jitendra Prabhu can help me out in that. uh, yeah, but then the session which we had today, like, this is the practical application of the four regulatory principles. So what I grasped from this lecture, I'll just share it with you. So Prabhupada's Krishna consciousness reinforces the four regulatory principle, that is no intoxication, no meat eating, no gambling, and no illicit sex, which strengthens the four pillars of religion. No intoxication is directly proportional to the austerities for the modern man. No meat eating is compassion. No gambling is truthfulness. However, I was not able to map illicit sex with cleanliness. So for that, there is no parallel in the pillar of religion. But so now Parikshit Maharaj, he was so, his understanding of scriptures and his belief in the Vedic culture was so strong that when he was faced by a question where he can allow Kali to live, so he gave Kali only those four places which were in favor, which were actually opposite of the four regulatory principles. So like he gave him four places: alcohol consumption, place where alcohol is consumed; second, animal slaughter; third, gambling; and prostitution. These are exactly the four regulatory principles which of Krishna, four regulatory principles in Krishna consciousness. So what I realized today is that if we follow these four regulatory principles, we will be protected by Kali, at least in these four areas. But still, gold is something which is not covered in the regulatory principles. And later in the Srimad Bhagavatam, because Parikshit Maharaj's crown is of gold, so Kali sits on their head. So that's what I've heard. I'm not sure about it, but so, like, do you think that allowing Kali to exist in one more place other than the four regulatory principle was a good opinion or a good choice? Because gold was a medium of transaction at that in those time period, and still, like, gold is adored by all the common man. So when we allow Kali to exist on places where gold is accumulated, we give them access, we give a Kali access to, a large amount of population. So that defeats the purpose of Parikshit Maharaj. So that's my question.
So the way I thought about it was, yeah, gold is like the standard for all currency. It is extremely important, um, and I know Prabhupada in some parts mentioned that he recommends transactions in direct gold instead of currency, which is based off of gold. And I think it's coming from the same logic that you cannot avoid coming in contact with gold. But what Parikshit Maharaj was reinforcing here was, one, Kali asked for that fifth place. So he was accommodating a surrendered soul's request. Two, he knew that, I mean, it's kind of, in a way, power and money go hand in hand. And then excess of money gives you excessive power, even in the current age. And that's how misuse of that power happens. So eventually, money does draw a lot of envious people to you, a lot of enemies to you. It does give you a lot of pride. And then that pride makes you take the wrong kind of decisions. So it kind of is leads to the other four principles of irreligion. So he knew that gold would anyway increase all four of this. So if he allowed Kali to exist where excessive gold was already there, it wouldn't hamper a lot of things much, given in his reign he was practicing and making sure that gold was being consumed and used in the best possible way in a moderated amount. He didn't think it to be that big of a calamity. But then again, we knew like he couldn't escape Kali forever. He knew this was turn of time. He knew Kali Yuga was coming. There was no escaping it. I guess in a way, he just bought some more time while he was ruling, making sure that he could keep things peaceful.
Yeah. So what I understand from your answer is that he was not against people accumulating gold, but he was against the greed of people, like the idea of accumulating gold. So, like, I was just wondering, like, why to say that you can exist in places where there is gold, and why not saying that, like, you can exist in houses of people who are greedy? Because greed is something which is not just of gold. Now people greed for paper, money. Our currency is notes. Currency notes are paper. That's not gold. So yet greed is the thing which is cause of fall for many of the noble souls. So yeah,
Why did
that
he not pick greed? Because greed is kind of a big term, right? You can be greedy of a lot of things. It was not a, I don't know exactly what the reasoning was. Obviously, it was a conversation between them. But I would say greed was again something that Kali might have said that this is too broad, and knowing that you are ruling, greed might be hard to find in a perfected system. And the way it's been written, like Parikshit Maharaj had a pretty perfect kingdom with people following what was supposed to be done. So I think greed would have generalized it too much, and even the little seed of greed would have allowed Kali to take over the minds of people. But instead, if he just kept it to gold in that way, I mean, I think the way um, systems back then worked was king was one of the most richest person in the state. Everything was kind of lower than the king in the wealth terms. So if king has the most amount of gold and if he's utilizing his gold well, then managing Kali's influence in the kingdom would be easier because it's um, at one location. I would say that might have been his thought, but again, speculations. I don't know exactly what he was thinking. um Gaurkuma Prabhu, Jitendra Prabhu, if you have anything to add.
This is, yeah, I mean, I like the discussion. Even I don't have a perfect answer for the question really, but I kind of I agree with Shreya Mataji. Yeah, the reasoning why Parikshit said gold. Yeah, there are certain contextual truths that we might not understand in our context, which were true back then.
right.
So, based on those contextual principles, uh, Parikshit Maharaj might have done that. So, yeah, it's a good question. We can go deeper into it. Ask Chaitanya Charan Prabhu also if required.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
And I'll try to find a verse where the four
Yes.
regulative principles are mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't know it offhand. And from what I know, it's a broad Vedic thing. It's not like there might be one verse somewhere in the Vedic scriptures.
Yeah.
I would have to find out. But
Yeah, but thanks to Shreya Mataji, like the representation of the slide and the like clarity of comparison between religion and the place where Kali was living just like give me a spark, like that's kind of similar to the four regulative principles of Krishna consciousness, and that's why we are following it. So it just reinforces the belief of how to and why to follow. Yeah, thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
And I must say, Samaksh, your tilak is awesome. Looks
Prabhu, I'm
perfect.
trying. I'm trying. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
I think Vinay Prabhu wanted to say something, and then we can end.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, really nice thing. Like, yeah. So, Hare Krishna, Mataji, it was, as everyone said, really flowing class. You started with like nice words, how like Guru is representative of all demigods and supreme personality of Godhead himself. And then you spoke about like importance of preaching also, like how even connecting someone with this life of devotion group is like how like important task that is. And then you like mentioned about how the principles of these four regulative principles, these are universal, they are not related to any religion or anything, and that's what constitutes you as a human. So really amazing points, and thank you so much for taking time and uh, preparing this beautiful presentation for us. And in the beginning, Prabhuji asked me like to talk about guru, so I want to add something to it. I was just thinking, because of this mercy of these gurus like Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and then Shad Goswami, Acharya Vrinda, and all the way to Narad Muni and Krishna, that we are able to have talks like this and discuss the esoteric pastimes which like was discussed by Uddhava and Sri Krishna, Maitreya Muni and Vidura, and so many these esoteric pastimes we are like all able to come together and discuss with each other, which was only possible for rishis like the rishis who were in Naimisharanya. So this is all mercy of our gurus like Srila Prabhupada, his representatives, and Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj. So I think this is day that we can like express our gratefulness to them and pray at their lotus feet today in our minds. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Prabhu, you're
Check
on
this.
mute. Yeah.
On that note, I think, yeah. So, sorry, Jitendra Prabhu, go ahead.
Sorry, just quickly, Samaksh Prabhu, you can refer to this. So this is a verse in this chapter itself. Dyutam panam striya suna yatra dharmas chaturveda. So it says Dyutam panam striya suna, that is the four sinful activities. And then it says yatra adharma, which is yatra means wherever, adharma sinful activities, chaturveda, four kinds. So four kinds of sinful activities are Dyutam panam striya suna. That is the four sinful acts.
Which text is this, Prabhu?
This is 117:38 Bhagavatam.
Okay.
The same
Okay.
chapter that was discussed.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Do you want to conclude, Jitendra Prabhu?
Yes. So thank you all. Thank you, Shreya Mataji, for this wonderful class, and thank you everyone for the wonderful reflections and questions. Very nice, productive discussions. I love the discussions, especially today. Yeah. So thank you so much. So I guess we'll end here, and we'll meet next Wednesday again for a wonderful class by our own Vishal Prabhu. Hari Bol. So Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam Mahapuran ki jai.
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 Shreya Mataji ki jai.
Jai.
Jai.